I never thought my own flesh and blood would look me in the eyes and say those words. "You'll never amount to anything." The same words I had heard from my father decades ago. The same words I had sworn never to say to my own children. Yet here was my son, Michael, throwing them in my face as if I were nothing more than the dirt beneath his manicured lawn. I'm Frank Dawson, 67 years old, with calloused hands that tell the story of a lifetime of honest work. For 45 years, I built houses across Massachusetts, from modest Cape Cods and working-class neighborhoods to sprawling colonials in Newton and Wellesley. I started as a carpenter's apprentice at 18 and worked my way up to owning my own small construction company. Nothing fancy, just enough to support my family and put something aside for retirement. When my wife Sarah died of breast cancer 12 years ago, something in Michael changed. He was 28 then, already working at a prestigious financial firm in Boston, living what he called the real American dream. Sarah had always been the buffer between us, smoothing over the rough edges of our relationship. Without her, the distance between Michael and me only grew wider. My daughter, Gemma, lives across the country in Seattle with her husband and their twin girls. We talk every Sunday, and she always asks when I'll come visit, but I can hear the relief in her voice when I make excuses about not being able to travel just yet. Everyone has their own lives to live. I understand that. After Sarah died, I threw myself into my work. The company expanded, and I hired more people. We built more houses, bigger houses. I didn't know what else to do with my grief, so I buried it under concrete foundations and wooden frames. By the time I hit 65, I had a solid nest egg, not enough to buy a yacht or a vacation home in the Bahamas, but enough to live comfortably and leave something for my children. I sold the company to my foreman, Jake, who had been with me for 20 years. He gave me a fair price, and I finally retired. That's when the trouble started. "Dad, you can't just sit around watching TV all day," Michael said over dinner at his house in Lexington. It was the monthly dinner his wife, Heather, insisted on hosting. "You need a purpose." "I have hobbies," I replied, cutting into the overcooked steak on my plate. "I'm learning woodworking. Building furniture." Michael rolled his eyes. "Great, more splinters and sawdust. You should be enjoying life now. Traveling, playing golf, something dignified." Heather nodded in agreement, her blonde hair bobbing perfectly around her shoulders. "Frank, we're worried about you. All alone in that house." "I'm fine," I said, the way I always did. The truth was, I wasn't fine. The house was too quiet, too empty. But it was mine, the home Sarah and I had built together, where we had raised our children. I wasn't ready to let it go. "Actually," Michael said, putting down his fork, "we've been thinking about this a lot. We found a really nice retirement community in Florida. Great amenities, medical care on site, plenty of activities." I stopped chewing. "Florida? It makes perfect sense, Dad. You sell the house, move somewhere warm. No more Massachusetts winters breaking your back with shoveling snow." "I don't mind the snow," I said. "And I'm not ready for a retirement home." Michael sighed heavily. "It's not a home, it's a community. And let's be practical. The house is too big for you, the maintenance is too much, and frankly, it's a waste of capital." A waste of capital. That's how my son saw the home his mother and I had scrimped and saved for, where he had grown up playing in the backyard. "I'm doing fine with the house," I insisted. "Jake stops by to help with anything major." "Jake," Michael repeated with that tone he used whenever I mentioned my former employees. As if people who worked with their hands were somehow beneath him. "Wouldn't you rather have professionals taking care of things?" "Jake is a professional," I said, feeling heat rise in my face. "One of the best contractors in Boston." Michael and Heather exchanged a look I had seen too many times, the "dad's being difficult again" look. "Just think about it," Heather said in her soothing voice, the one she probably used with difficult clients at her interior design business. "We only want what's best for you. I nodded and changed the subject, asking about their son, my grandson Tyler, who was away at his first year of college. But the seed had been planted, and I could see it growing behind Michael's eyes. He had plans for me, and they didn't include me staying in my own home. A week later, Michael called and asked me to come over to help with some yard work. It seemed odd. He had a landscaping service that kept his property looking like something out of a magazine, but I was glad for the invitation. Maybe this was his way of trying to connect. When I arrived, Michael was standing in his driveway wearing pressed khakis and a polo shirt, checking his watch. "Dad, good, you're here. The backyard needs clearing. There's a stack of mulch that needs spreading, and the hedges need trimming." I looked around, confused. I thought we were going to do this together. Michael checked his phone. "I have a client meeting I couldn't reschedule. The tools are in the shed. Heather will bring you some water now and then." "Michael," I said, trying to keep my voice even, "I didn't come over to be your landscaper. I thought we were spending time together." He looked up from his phone, irritation flashing across his face. "Dad, I'm trying to help you. You need to stay active, have a purpose. You've been moping around since you sold the business." "I haven't been moping." "Yes, you have. You call me with the same stories about your little woodworking projects. It's sad, Dad. You're becoming one of those old men who has nothing left." The words hit like a physical blow. "That's not fair, Michael." He sighed, checking his watch again. "Look, the truth is, you never really amounted to much, did you? A small construction company, a modest house. You could have done so much more if you'd had any ambition." I felt as if all the air had been sucked from my lungs. I built a business from nothing. I supported our family. I put you through college. "And I'm grateful," he said in a tone that held no gratitude at all. "But let's be honest, you peaked a long time ago. Now you're just diminishing. Do this yard work. It'll be good for you to have a task, something to accomplish." With that, he turned and walked to his Tesla, sliding into the driver's seat without looking back. I stood there, a 67-year-old man being treated like a day laborer by my own son, in his yard that was already perfectly maintained. But something in me couldn't walk away. Maybe it was pride, maybe it was shock, or maybe it was just the desperate hope that if I did this for him, he might see me differently. So I walked to the shed, found the tools, and began spreading mulch around plants that already had plenty. As I worked under the hot sun, Heather occasionally brought out a glass of water, her eyes never quite meeting mine. Around noon, I heard voices and looked up to see Tyler, my grandson, home from college for the weekend, standing on the patio with a couple of friends. "That's my grandpa," I heard him say, and something in his tone made me stop working. "Dad has him doing the yard as a favor. Kind of sad, right? He used to have his own business, but now he's basically just killing time until he dies." The casual cruelty of it, the dismissal of my entire life's work, made my hands shake. I set down the rake and walked over to where Tyler stood. "Tyler," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Good to see you home from school." He had the decency to look embarrassed. "Oh, hey, Grandpa. Didn't see you there." "Clearly," I said. "I'm going to head home now. Tell your dad the mulch is spread." "Sure, whatever," Tyler mumbled, already turning back to his friends. I drove home in silence, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. In my driveway, I sat in the car for a long time, remembering the years of 5 a.m. wake-ups, working through blizzards and heat waves, missing baseball games and school plays because a job had to be finished on schedule. Also, Michael could have opportunities one never had. "You'll never amount to anything." The words echoed in my head, not in Michael's voice but in my father's. He had said those exact words to me when I told him I was going to be a carpenter instead of going to college. I had spent my life proving him wrong, or so I thought. Had I failed? Was a lifetime of honest work, a solid business, a home of my own, and 2 children raised to adulthood not amounting to anything? I finally went inside, to the quiet house that Michael thought was too big for me, and for the first time since Sarah died, I allowed myself to really cry. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. If Michael thought I had never amounted to anything, perhaps it was time to show him exactly what I was worth. I made coffee and sat at my kitchen table with a notepad, making a list. First, I called my lawyer, Patricia Reynolds, who had handled the sale of my business and had been a friend for 20 years. "Pat, I need to review my will and make some changes," I said when she came on the line. "Is everything okay, Frank?" Her voice held concern. "Just some family issues that have made me rethink a few things. Can I come in this week?" We set up an appointment for the following day, and then I made my second call, to my accountant, Bill Chen. "Bill, I need a complete overview of my assets, investments, everything. And I have some questions about trusts." By the end of the day, I had appointments lined up with my financial advisor, my insurance agent, and a real estate appraiser. It was time to take stock of exactly what I had built over a lifetime of work that my son thought amounted to nothing. The next few weeks were a blur of meetings, paperwork, and careful planning. I learned things about estate planning, trusts, and financial structures that I had never known before. Each professional I spoke with gave me pieces of a puzzle that slowly came together. Michael called twice during this time, leaving messages about coming over to talk about your future. I didn't call back. I wasn't ready to face him yet, not until I had everything in order. What I discovered during those weeks surprised even me. The business I had built and sold was worth considerably more than I had realized. The pension plan I had set up for myself and my employees had performed exceptionally well. The house that Michael thought was too big for me had tripled in value since Sarah and I had bought it 25 years ago. And the investments my financial advisor had guided me toward had grown steadily, if not spectacularly. All told, my net worth was just over $3.2 million. Not a fortune by Boston standards, perhaps, but far more than the nothing Michael seemed to think I had. "You've been smart with your money, Frank," Bill said during our final meeting. "Lived below your means, invested consistently. A lot of people with twice your income have half of what you've accumulated." I nodded, thinking of Michael's house in Lexington with its 3-car garage and heated pool, the vacation home in Vermont, the private school for Tyler. I had always assumed he could afford it all with his finance job. Now I wondered. While I was reorganizing my financial life, I was also making another kind of assessment. I began paying more attention to what Michael was doing, not just what he was saying. I started with simple online searches, looking at public records, social media, anything that might give me insight into my son's life that he wasn't sharing with me. What I found was troubling. Michael's firm had been mentioned in several articles about questionable investment practices. Nothing illegal, but certainly aggressive, with former clients complaining about hidden fees and promised returns that never materialized. His name specifically came up in a thread on a financial forum, where someone described him as slick, convincing, but ultimately only interested in his own commission. Then there was the house. A quick search of property records showed that Michael and Heather had refinanced 3 times in the past 5 years, each time pulling out equity. Their mortgage was now significantly higher than when they had first bought the place. The vacation home in Vermont had a second mortgage on it as well. I also found Tyler's college tuition bills in an email Michael had accidentally forwarded to my old business address, which still forwarded to my personal email. The numbers were staggering, and according to the email thread, they were behind on payments for the spring semester. The picture that emerged was of a family living far beyond their means, leveraged to the hilt, and possibly facing financial troubles they weren't acknowledging. It was a house of cards, and I had a growing suspicion that Michael saw my assets as the solution to his problems. A month after the yard work incident, Michael showed up at my door unannounced. "Dad, we need to talk," he said, walking past me into the living room without waiting for an invitation. "You've been avoiding me." "I've been busy," I replied, closing the door. Michael looked around the living room, taking in the woodworking projects I had completed, a new coffee table, bookshelf, and rocking chair. Still playing with your tools, I see. I let the comment pass. What did you want to talk about? He sat down on the couch, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. I'm worried about you, Dad. Living alone, no real social life, just existing. I'm fine, Michael. No, you're not. And I have a solution. He pulled a glossy brochure from his jacket pocket and handed it to me. Sunset Gardens. It's not just a retirement community, it's a lifestyle upgrade. I glanced at the brochure, with its pictures of smiling seniors playing golf and sitting by a pool. In Florida. Yes, in Naples. Beautiful weather year-round, top-notch medical facilities, and a built-in community of people your age. And what happens to this house? I asked, already knowing the answer. Michael tried to look casual. Well, obviously you'd sell it. The market's hot right now, and this neighborhood is very desirable. The equity would more than cover your entry fee at Sunset Gardens, with plenty left over for your future care. And for you and Heather? I asked quietly. He blinked. What do you mean? I mean, how much of my equity were you planning to use for yourselves? Michael's face flushed. That's not fair, Dad. We're trying to help you. Are you? Or are you trying to help yourselves to my assets? He stood up, anger flashing in his eyes. What's gotten into you? We're family. Of course I'm concerned about your assets, they're part of our family legacy. A legacy from someone who never amounted to anything? I said, the words bitter on my tongue. Michael had the grace to look embarrassed. I didn't mean that. I was having a bad day. So was I. Being treated like a hired hand by my own son tends to ruin a day. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so like his mother that it made my heart ache. Look, Dad, I'm sorry about that. It was inconsiderate. But my point about your future still stands. This house is too much for you. You need to be somewhere with support. I stood up slowly. Michael, I appreciate your concern, but I'm not moving to Florida. I'm not selling this house. And I'm not giving you access to my family legacy to solve whatever financial problems you're having. His head snapped up. What are you talking about? I don't have financial problems. 3 refinances in 5 years. A second mortgage on the Vermont house. Tyler's overdue tuition. I listed them calmly, watching his face pale with each item. You're overextended, and you see me as the solution. You've been spying on me? His voice rose in indignation. I've been paying attention. There's a difference. Michael paced the room, his carefully constructed facade crumbling. Okay, fine. Things have been challenging at work. The market's volatile, clients are nervous. But it's temporary. And yes, I thought maybe you could help out. Is that so wrong? Parents are supposed to help their children. I put you through college without debt. I helped with the down payment on your first house. I've already helped, Michael. But I won't be treated like I'm nothing, then asked to hand over everything I've worked for. He stopped pacing and faced me. Dad, you don't understand. I need. How much? I interrupted. What? How much trouble are you in? Financially. Give me a number. Michael hesitated, then slumped back onto the couch. About $400,000. The firm cut bonuses last year and the year before. The Vermont house needs a new roof. Tyler's tuition, it all adds up. I nodded slowly. $400,000 is a lot of money. It's a mess, he admitted, running his hands over his face. I didn't want you to know. I was trying to handle it. By shipping me off to Florida and selling my house. He didn't deny it. It seemed like a solution that could work for everyone. Except me, I said quietly. Michael looked up, and for a moment, I saw desperation in his eyes. Will you help? A loan, maybe? I'll pay it back once things turn around at work. I considered him for a long moment. My son. My flesh and blood. The boy I had taught to ride a bike, to throw a baseball, to drive a car. Now a man asking me to bail him out of the consequences of his own choices. I'll think about it, I said finally. But I need time. Relief washed over his face. Thank you, Dad. Really. This means a lot. After he left, I sat in my quiet house and thought about what Michael had become, and what part one had played in that transformation. Had I given him too much? Not enough? Had I somehow failed to teach him the value of hard work, of living within his means, of treating people with respect? Or was this simply who he had chosen to be? The next day, I visited Emma in Seattle. I hadn't told her I was coming, and the surprise on her face when she opened her door was genuine. Dad, she exclaimed, throwing her arms around me. What are you doing here? I needed to see my daughter, I said simply, hugging her back. Emma's home was modest but warm, filled with children's artwork and the comfortable chaos of a family with young twins. Her husband, David, a high school science teacher, greeted me with a firm handshake and genuine warmth. The girls, Lily and Rose, barely remembered me from their last visit to Massachusetts 2 years ago, but they quickly warmed up when I presented them with the dollhouse furniture I had made in my workshop. Over dinner, after the girls were in bed, I told Emma and David everything about Michael's treatment of me, his financial troubles, and his thinly veiled attempt to get his hands on my assets. Emma's face grew darker with each detail. I knew something was going on with him. He called me last month asking if I could invest in some opportunity he had. When I said we didn't have extra money to invest, he got snippy and said something about how Dad would be leaving us a nice inheritance soon anyway. He said what? I felt a cold anger settle in my chest. I shut him down immediately, Emma assured me. I told him that was a horrible thing to say, and that I wasn't interested in any inheritance, I just wanted my dad around for as long as possible. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I meant it, Dad. David shook his head. I never understood Michael's obsession with status and money. You two had the same upbringing, but you turned out so differently. Emma shrugged. Michael always wanted more. Remember how he used to compare our house to his friends' houses in the fancy neighborhoods? He was embarrassed that you were just a contractor, Dad. Even though you literally built houses, which is about the most impressive thing I can think of. I smiled at her loyalty. I've been thinking about what to do. About Michael, and about my estate in general. You don't need to do anything, Emma said firmly. It's your money, your house. You earned it all. I know. But I want to be smart about this. I don't want to just react out of hurt or anger. We talked late into the night, discussing options, consequences, what was fair versus what felt right. By the time I flew back to Boston 3 days later, I had a plan. My first stop after returning home was to Patricia's office, where I laid out exactly what I wanted to do. She listened carefully, asking questions, suggesting alternatives where she saw potential problems. Are you sure about this, Frank? She asked when I had finished explaining. It's a significant change from your previous arrangements. I'm sure, I said firmly. Can you make it happen? She nodded slowly. Yes, but it will take some time to set everything up properly. And you'll need to have some difficult conversations. I'm ready for that, I said, feeling a strange sense of peace with my decision. The next step was hiring a private investigator, something I had never imagined doing, especially not to look into my own son. But I needed to know exactly what I was dealing with before I moved forward. The PI, a retired police detective named Marlene Jackson, was thorough and discreet. Within 2 weeks, she had compiled a detailed report on Michael's finances, work situation, and personal life that confirmed my worst fears and revealed new concerns. Michael's firm was indeed under investigation by the Securities and Exchange Commission for potentially misleading investment practices. Michael himself wasn't named in the investigation, but he was on thin ice at work, having missed targets for 3 quarters in a row. The family's spending continued to outpace their income by a significant margin, with credit card debt mounting on top of their mortgage troubles. Most troubling of all, Marlene found evidence that Michael had been asking about power of attorney forms, specifically looking into how to get decision-making authority over an elderly parent's affairs. It's not uncommon, Marlene explained as we sat in her office reviewing her findings. Adult children get desperate, convince themselves they know better than their parents, and look for legal ways to take control. Usually, they tell themselves it's for the parents' own good. I nodded grimly. And if I were to suddenly become incompetent? As the person with power of attorney, he would have control over your assets. He could sell your house, move you into a facility, and make financial decisions without your consent. I thought of the retirement community in Florida, the insistence that I couldn't manage on my own, the constant suggestions that I was declining. It was all part of a strategy. Thank you, Marlene, I said, taking the folder of information she had compiled. This is exactly what I needed to know. Armed with the full picture of what I was facing, I proceeded with the next phase of my plan. Over the next month, I made a series of careful, deliberate moves that would change everything. First, I met with Bill Chan and my financial advisor to restructure my assets in a way that would protect them from any attempt by Michael to gain control. We set up irrevocable trusts for specific purposes, moved some investments into vehicles that couldn't be easily liquidated, and ensured that any attempt to assert power of attorney would trigger immediate reviews and safeguards. Next, I hired a contractor, not Jake, as that would have raised Michael's suspicions, to make modifications to my house. Grab bars in the bathrooms, a stair lift, and other features that would make it clear I intended to stay in my home for the long term. I also enrolled in a senior wellness program at the local community center, documenting my participation and physical capabilities. Then I updated my will and estate plan with Patricia, making changes that reflected both my current wishes and the reality of my family situation. The documents were carefully crafted, clear in their intent, and legally ironclad. Finally, I reached out to Michael to invite him and his family to dinner at my house. I've made a decision about what we discussed, I told him over the phone. I'd like to talk about it in person. That's great, Dad, he said, sounding relieved. We'll be there. What time? I could hear the anticipation in his voice, the assumption that I was going to give him what he wanted. It was almost sad how predictable he had become. The evening of the dinner, I prepared Sarah's famous pot roast, her secret recipe that Michael had always loved. I set the dining room table with our good china, the set we had used only for holidays and special occasions. This was, in its way, a special occasion, though not the one Michael was expecting. They arrived at 6, Michael immediately looking around the house as if assessing its value, Heather complimenting my cooking with her practiced social grace, and Tyler barely looking up from his phone. I served dinner, made small talk, and waited until we were nearly finished before bringing up the reason for the gathering. Michael, I said, setting down my fork, you asked me for help with your financial situation. I've given it a lot of thought. He straightened in his chair, a smile spreading across his face. I appreciate that, Dad. I knew you'd come through. I've decided to offer you a loan, I continued, of $100,000. With proper documentation, a repayment schedule, and interest at the current prime rate. The smile faltered. A loan? With interest? Yes. That seems fair, given that you've described your situation as temporary. Once things turn around at work, as you put it, you should have no trouble repaying it. Michael glanced at Heather, who was staring at her plate. Dad, I was thinking of something more substantial. The amount I mentioned. was $400,000 I finished for him. That's not a loan, Michael. That's a bailout. And I'm not in a position to do that. Not in a position? His voice rose slightly. Dad, we both know you have the money. You're just choosing not to help your own son. I met his gaze steadily. I'm offering help. Just not the blank check you were hoping for. What about the Florida idea? Heather interjected, her voice gentle but insistent. It really would be best for everyone. I'm not moving to Florida, I said firmly. And I'm not selling this house. Michael pushed his plate away, anger flashing in his eyes. So that's it? You'll let us drown financially when you could easily help. I didn't create your financial problems, Michael. Your choices did. Living beyond your means, leveraging yourself to the hilt, trying to maintain an image you can't afford. You don't understand the pressure we're under, he snapped. The schools, the neighborhood, the social expectations. It costs money to live in our world. Then perhaps you should consider living in a different world, I suggested quietly. One you can actually afford. Tyler looked up from his phone for the first time, watching the exchange with sudden interest. Michael stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. I can't believe this. After everything we've done for you. What exactly have you done for me, Michael? I asked, remaining seated. Treated me like a servant in your yard? Suggested I'm incompetent and need to be put away? Looked at the home I built with your mother as nothing but a financial asset to be liquidated? That's not fair, Heather protested, but her eyes wouldn't meet mine. What's not fair, I said, my voice never rising, is teaching your son that his grandfather never amounted to anything and is just killing time until he dies. Those were your words, Tyler, weren't they? Tyler's face flushed red. I didn't. I mean, I was just repeating what Dad always says. Michael shot his son a warning look, but the damage was done. I see, I said, nodding slowly. Well, that clarifies things considerably. I reached beside me to a side table where I had placed a folder earlier in the day. Opening it, I removed several documents and laid them on the table. Since I apparently never amounted to anything, I thought you might be interested in seeing exactly what nothing looks like. I pushed the first document toward Michael, a statement of my net worth, carefully prepared by Bill Chen. Michael's eyes widened as he scanned the numbers. This is? I didn't realize. Clearly, I said. I've lived within my means, saved consistently, and made prudent investments. Something you might consider trying. Next, I placed a copy of my new will on the table. I've also updated my estate plan. Emma will be the executor, not you. My assets will be divided equally between Emma and you, but yours will be held in trust, with strict conditions regarding access and use. A trust? Like I'm a child who can't be trusted with money? Michael's face flushed with anger. Like someone who has demonstrated poor financial judgment, I corrected. The trust will ensure that my hard-earned money doesn't disappear into the black hole of your debt. Finally, I laid down the third document, a detailed account of the changes I had made to protect my assets during my lifetime. I've also taken steps to ensure that no one can make decisions about my finances or living situation without my explicit consent. No power of attorney maneuvers, no declarations of incompetence, no forced moves to retirement communities. Michael stared at the papers, then at me, shock and anger warring on his face. You think I was trying to what? Take advantage of you? Weren't you? I asked simply. Heather stood up, smoothing her dress nervously. I think we should go. This has gotten unpleasant. Michael gathered the papers and shoved them back toward me. Keep your money, Dad. Keep your house. Keep your judgments. We don't need your help. The loan offer stands, I said calmly. $100,000, properly documented, with a reasonable repayment plan. Think about it. Tyler, looking uncomfortable, mumbled a goodbye and headed for the door. Heather followed, not meeting my eyes. Michael lingered, staring at me with a mixture of anger and something else, perhaps regret, perhaps shame. "You've changed, Dad," he said finally. "You never used to be this cold, this calculating." "No, Michael. I've just stopped being naive. There's a difference." After they left, I sat alone in my dining room, surrounded by the remains of the dinner and the weight of what had just happened. I had stood up for myself, protected what was mine, and shown my son that I wasn't the diminished old man he thought I was. It should have felt triumphant. Instead, it felt hollow, sad, a victory no one would celebrate. I cleaned up slowly, washing Sarah's china by hand, thinking about what she would have made of all this. She would have been heartbroken to see the gulf between Michael and me, but I thought she would have understood why I had to take a stand. That night, I called Emma to tell her how it had gone. She listened quietly, then sighed. "I'm proud of you, Dad. It couldn't have been easy." "It wasn't," I admitted. "But it was necessary. Do you think there's any chance for you and Michael to repair things?" I looked out the window at the dark yard, where Michael and Emma had played as children. "I don't know. That's up to him now." 3 weeks passed with no word from Michael. I continued with my life, my woodworking projects, my twice-weekly visits to the community center, occasional dinners with Patricia or Bill. I spoke to Emma regularly, and she reported that Michael wasn't returning her calls either. Then, on a rainy Tuesday morning, there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find Tyler standing on my porch, soaking wet and looking miserable. "Tyler? What are you doing here? Shouldn't you be at college?" "I dropped out," he said, water dripping from his hair. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside, grabbing a towel from the hall closet and handing it to him. "What do you mean, you dropped out?" "It's the middle of the semester." Tyler dried his hair half-heartedly. "Dad stopped paying tuition last month. The university gave me a grace period, but yesterday they locked me out of classes. I didn't know where else to go. I led him to the kitchen and put on a pot of coffee." "Have you talked to your father about this?" "He won't answer my calls," Tyler said, slumping into a chair. "Mom says he's dealing with some business issues and needs space." I sighed, pouring coffee for both of us. "Tyler, what's really going on?" "The whole story, please." My grandson looked up, his young face troubled beyond his years. "Everything's falling apart, Grandpa. Dad's in serious trouble at work, some investigation about misleading clients or something. He's drinking a lot. Mom's talking about going to stay with her sister for a while. And our house." He trailed off. "What about the house?" "There's a foreclosure notice. I saw it on Dad's desk before I left for school yesterday. They're going to take the house, Grandpa." I sat down heavily across from him. This was worse than I had imagined. "And your father hasn't asked for help? From me, or from anyone?" Tyler shook his head. "He's too proud. After what happened at dinner, he says he'd rather lose everything than come crawling back to you. Pride. The Dawson family curse, passed down from father to son like an heirloom. I knew it well, had fought it in myself all my life." "What do you want me to do, Tyler?" He looked surprised by the question. "I don't know. I just didn't have anywhere else to go." "You can stay here as long as you need to," I said. "But we need to contact your parents, let them know you're safe." Tyler nodded reluctantly. Will you help them? Dad made mistakes, but he's still your son." Out of the mouths of babes. Or in this case, out of the mouth of a 19-year-old who suddenly seemed a lot more mature than his father. "I'll try," I promised. "But your dad needs to be willing to accept help on my terms, not his." I called Heather first, who answered on the first ring, panic in her voice. Tyler? Is that you? It's Frank, Heather. Tyler is here with me. He's safe. Her relief was audible. Thank God. We've been frantic. He didn't come home last night, and with everything else. He told me about the foreclosure, and about Michael's work problems. There was a long silence. It's bad, Frank. Worse than Michael will admit. The SEC is investigating his department, and several of his clients have filed complaints. He's been placed on leave pending the outcome. We're 3 months behind on the mortgage. And now Tyler. Let me talk to Michael, I said. He's not here. He left last night after a fight and hasn't come back. I've been calling hospitals, afraid. She broke off, choking back tears. Heather, listen to me. I want to help, but I need Michael to be honest with me. Completely honest. No more games, no more manipulation. I'll tell him when he comes home, she promised. And Frank, thank you for taking care of Tyler. After hanging up, I turned to my grandson, who had been listening intently. You can stay in your mom's old room. Get some rest. We'll figure this out. Tyler hesitated, then asked in a small voice, Do you really think I'm just like him? Like Dad? I studied my grandson, seeing for the first time the uncertainty beneath his privileged exterior. No, Tyler. I think you're your own person. And I think you have choices to make about what kind of man you want to become. Later that afternoon, Michael finally called. His voice was rough, subdued. Dad, Heather says Tyler is with you. He is. He's safe. A long pause. I need to come get him. He's welcome to stay here, Michael. But yes, you should come see him. And we need to talk. About what? How I failed at everything. How right you were. Bitterness edged his words. No, son. About how I can help, if you'll let me. Another pause, longer this time. Why would you help me now? After everything I said, everything I tried to do? Because you're my son, I said simply. And because everyone deserves a second chance. Michael arrived 2 hours later, looking haggard and defeated, nothing like the confident financial advisor who had ordered me to clean his yard. He hugged Tyler tightly, apologizing again and again, while I waited in the kitchen, giving them space. Eventually, Michael came to find me, his shoulders slumped. Dad, I don't know where to start. Sit down, I said, gesturing to the chair across from me. Let's talk about what's really going on. For the next hour, Michael laid out the full extent of his troubles, the investigation at work that would likely end with him losing his job and possibly his professional licenses, the mountain of debt that had been growing for years, the foreclosure that was just weeks away from becoming final. I've made such a mess of everything, he admitted, running his hands through his hair. I kept thinking the next bonus, the next deal would turn things around. I got caught in this cycle of needing to look successful to be successful, spending money to make connections that would bring in more money. And then when things started to fall apart, I couldn't admit it, not to Heather, not to myself, and certainly not to you. Why not to me? I asked quietly. Michael looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. Because I spent so many years looking down on what you did, Dad. Thinking I was better, smarter, more successful. How could I come to you and admit that with all my fancy education and connections, I had failed where you had succeeded, at building something real, something that lasted? The admission hung in the air between us, the words I had waited years to hear. The loan offer still stands, I said finally. $100,000. But that's not enough to solve all your problems, is it? He shook his head. Not even close. At this point, it would just delay the inevitable. We're going to lose the house, my career is probably over, and I have no idea what comes next. I considered him for a long moment, this broken version of my arrogant son, and made a decision. I have a proposition for you, Michael. A way forward, but with conditions. What kind of conditions? Wariness crept into his voice. First, complete honesty from now on. With me, with Heather, with Tyler. No more pretending, no more keeping up appearances. He nodded slowly. That seems fair. What else? You sell the house in Lexington before it goes into foreclosure. And the place in Vermont. Downsize to something you can actually afford. Michael winced but nodded again. And? You come work for me. He blinked. Work for you? Doing what? You're retired. I'm unretiring, I said. Jake has been asking me to consult on some projects. There's a shortage of experienced builders, and prices for quality construction have gone through the roof. I'm starting a new company, smaller than before, focused on high-end renovations and custom work. I need someone who understands finance, contracts, client relations. Dad, I don't know anything about construction. You don't need to. You'll learn the business side. Tyler can work with us too, during breaks from school, which he will be returning to, by the way, though perhaps a more affordable option than where he was. Michael stared at me. You'd do this? After everything? Not for free, I clarified. This isn't charity. You'll start at a reasonable salary, much less than you're used to. You'll work hard, learn the business from the ground up. In 5 years, if things go well, you'll have the option to buy in as a partner. And yes, I'll help with the immediate financial crisis, but as an investment in the business, not a handout. Why would you take this risk on me? I haven't exactly proven myself trustworthy. I leaned forward. Because I believe people can change, Michael. I believe you've learned some hard lessons. And because despite everything, you're still my son, and I'm not ready to give up on you. Tyler appeared in the doorway, having obviously been listening. I think it's a good idea, Dad, he said quietly. Working with Grandpa. Learning something real. Michael looked from his son to me, and I saw something shift in his eyes, a recognition, perhaps, that the values he had rejected might be worth reconsidering. Okay, he said finally. I accept. All of it, the conditions, the job, everything. I nodded, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. Then we have a deal. We'll start next week. That was 2 years ago. Today, Dawson & Son Construction specializes in historic renovations and custom builds in Boston's oldest neighborhoods. Michael has proven to be an excellent business manager, his financial acumen honed by the hard lessons of his past. Tyler works with us during summer breaks from the state university he now attends, studying architectural engineering. Heather and Michael live in a modest condo now, within their means for the first time in their adult lives. They're still working through the financial aftermath of their previous lifestyle, but making steady progress. More importantly, their marriage has strengthened through the crisis, built now on honesty rather than appearances. Emma and her family visit more often, and the cousins have developed a real relationship. Last Christmas, all of us gathered in my home, the home Sarah and I built, the home I refused to give up, for the first holiday together in many years. As for me, I'm 69 now, still working a few days a week, still making furniture in my workshop, still living in my too-big house that feels just right. I've updated my will again, this time without the restrictions on Michael's inheritance. He's proven himself worthy of trust, of respect. Yesterday, as we finished up a client meeting for a major renovation project, Michael turned to me in the truck and said something I never expected to hear. You know, Dad, I admire what you built, not just the houses, but the life. The integrity. I was too blinded by ambition to see it before, but now I get it. You amounted to everything that matters. I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded and kept driving. But later, alone in my workshop, I found myself talking to Sarah, as I often do. You were right, I told her empty chair. He just needed time to find his way. I like to think she heard me, and that she's proud of the man her son has become, and of the man who raised him, a man who amounted to something after all. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left.